Welcome to another deep dive. This time into something that might just rewrite how we understand, well, pretty much everything. We're looking at a collection of research notes, simulations too, and they all ask a pretty mind-blowing question. What if time, as we know it, isn't really a thing?
It's a radical idea, I'll give you that. But these sources, they don't just stop there. They propose replacing time with something they call the expansion factor, or E for short. And they're not just theorizing, they're actually applying this E across all sorts of fields, from like the lifespan of a mayfly to how a black hole works.
Okay, so what is this expansion factor?
Imagine the universe like a balloon, constantly inflating. And everything inside that balloon, it's not expanding at the same rate, right? Some things are expanding faster, some slower. E basically measures that rate of change relative to, well, everything else around it.
So like a city that's always growing with construction and all that, that would have a higher E than, say, a quiet forest.
Exactly. And get this, even your own body has an E. And it's always fluctuating. Things like your metabolism, even your emotional state, they can all influence it.
Wait, so my feelings can affect how fast I'm expanding?
It's a pretty surprising connection, but the research here, it suggests a strong correlation between your emotional state and how well your body regenerates. They even talk about studies on bipolar disorder, where really intense emotions, they seem to coincide with these like rapid shifts in a person's E.
So theoretically, if you could perfectly control your emotions, you could control your body's ability to heal.
It's a fascinating possibility. Definitely needs more research, though, to really understand what it all means. But the interesting thing is, E seems to apply not just to humans, but to all life in general.
Right. The research mentions a connection between E and how long different species live. They even had data on those crazy long-lived glass sponges.
Exactly, and the correlation is super consistent across the board. Basically, the faster an organism's E, the shorter its lifespan tends to be. It makes sense when you think about things like metabolism. A higher metabolic rate means a faster E, you're burning through your energy more quickly, so you live a shorter life.
So those glass sponges, with their super slow E, they're like the Zen masters of the animal kingdom, right? Taking it slow and steady wins the race.
Seems that way. But what's really exciting is the possibility of, like, manipulating E to actually extend lifespan. The research mentions some ongoing work looking at telomerase activity. That's an enzyme that affects how cells age, and how changes in E might influence it.
So if we crack the code of E, we might actually be able to slow down or even reverse aging.
It's definitely a potential game changer. But E goes way beyond just biology, you know? These notes suggest that E might even be the key to understanding some of the biggest mysteries of the universe.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. We're talking black holes, speed of light, stuff like that, right?
Yeah. It's pretty wild, but E seems to fit into these complex equations surprisingly well. For example, according to this research, light actually has an E of 0, which means it's always expanding at the maximum rate. That's why it travels at the speed of light. Basically, from light's perspective, time doesn't exist.
So light is basically living life in the fast lane, experiencing everything at once. What about black holes then? How do they fit in?
Black holes, they're fascinating because their E is incredibly high. They're almost infinitely dense, which is what warps space-time around them. It's like their super intense E is pulling everything in, even time itself.
Okay, my head is officially spinning. This E concept, it seems to apply to everything, from the tiniest particles to, like, the most massive things in the universe. But what about stuff that just seems to defy logic, like quantum entanglement?
Ah, yes. Spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it. This is where the idea of E replacing time gets really interesting. What if entangled particles, they're not bound by time as we understand it? What if they're linked by a shared E instead, which makes distance completely irrelevant?
So two entangled particles could be billions of light years apart, but their shared E keeps them connected. And if we could manipulate E, could we use that connection for, like, teleportation?
Teleportation. It's a really provocative idea, definitely something scientists are looking into, although no one's beaming anyone up just yet. But yeah, manipulating E to influence quantum entanglement, it's a really tantalizing possibility.
Okay, I need to take a deep breath. This is all fascinating, but it feels a bit like we're floating in the theoretical clouds. What about E's applications here on Earth, in everyday life?
Well, believe it or not, researchers have actually developed some pretty practical applications of E, even in, like, finance.
Wait, you're telling me this cosmic concept can help us understand the stock market?
It might sound counterintuitive, but researchers have actually built a forex trading model that uses E instead of, traditional time-based analysis, and it can predict market trends.
So instead of looking at charts and graphs over time, this model is analyzing the E of different currencies and market indicators.
Exactly. And the remarkable thing is, this E-based model can actually pick up on patterns that traditional models completely miss. It's especially good at predicting these short-term price fluctuations. They call it a burst pattern.
So using E could actually help traders identify good entry points and make better investment decisions. But how accurate are these E-based models? Have they been, rigorously tested?
Yeah, the research really emphasizes the extensive testing they've done. Different scenarios comparing E-based equations to real-world data. The results are pretty impressive. 85% accuracy in predicting lifespan, and get this, 90% accuracy with the financial market predictions.
90%. That's incredible. What are the limitations, though? What kind of risks are involved?
Well, it's important to remember that some areas, like quantum entanglement, they still need more work in terms of accuracy. And no model is perfect, of course, but the consistent results across such different fields, it's definitely compelling.
You've definitely got my curiosity piqued. What does the actual equation for E look like?
It might look a bit daunting at first, but it's actually pretty intuitive once you know what everything represents. The simplified version is E equals K1 times M plus K2 times W plus K3 times O plus K4 times F plus external factors.
Break that down for me. What do those letters stand for?
M is metabolism, W is water content, O stands for oxygen levels, and F is the frequency of external factors like sound and light. And then there's this X factor, which represents anything we haven't accounted for yet, or any external influences.
So by tweaking these variables, we could potentially influence E, and therefore things like lifespan, financial markets, even quantum entanglement. It's mind-blowing, but also kind of scary to think about the possibilities.
Definitely raises a lot of questions about, the nature of reality and our place in it all. But before we go too deep into those philosophical questions, there's one more important piece of this puzzle we need to talk about.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What else is there?
All of this research, all these findings, it's all meticulously compiled in something they call the E document. It's like a roadmap to understanding and applying E across all these different fields.
The E document. It sounds almost mythical, like some ancient text with forbidden knowledge.
Haha, it does have a certain mystique to it. After all, we are talking about challenging some of the most fundamental assumptions we have about time, energy, the very fabric of reality.
Okay, I'm hooked. We went from questioning the existence of time to, predicting the stock market. And now there's a secret document with the keys to understanding everything.
I'm glad you're enjoying the journey. The E document, it's incredibly dense, but it's packed with fascinating insights and potential breakthroughs. It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world.
All right, so what are we waiting for? Let's crack open this E document and see what secrets it holds.
Hold on just a second. Before we do that, let's quickly recap what we've learned so far. We started with a pretty radical idea. What if time isn't the fundamental constant we thought it was? Then we explored this concept of the expansion factor, or E, and how it might be the missing piece to understanding everything, from lifespan and aging to the mysteries of quantum entanglement.
It's a lot to take in, but this idea that everything is connected through this underlying energy flow is really exciting. Makes you wonder what other hidden connections are out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? There's always more to learn, more to uncover. And our journey with the E document, it's only just beginning. Ready to dive into its secrets and explore the potential of E even further.
Absolutely. Where do we even start?
Let's begin by looking at how the E document applies E to the field of biology. Specifically, it has this model that uses telomere length and their reduction rates to understand how E impacts lifespan. Who knows? We might even find clues about how to manipulate E to, influence aging itself.
Let's do it. Hit me with those mind-blowing revelations.
Okay, so let's get into the biological stuff, specifically the section on lifespan and aging in the E document. We touched on it earlier, but this thing, it goes into some serious detail.
I'm all ears. I remember being really interested in the connection between E and telomeres. You know those little protective caps on our chromosomes? Can you remind me how those fit in again?
Of course. Telomeres, they're like the little plastic tips on your shoelaces. Right, they stop them from fraying. Well, they protect our chromosomes, but they get shorter as we age. The E document, it basically says this shortening is directly tied to an organism's E.
So faster E means your telomeres shorten faster and you live a shorter life. Kind of depressing, right? But could we, like, slow that down by changing our E?
Now you're thinking like the researchers behind the E document. They even came up with an equation. It uses telomere length and how fast they shrink to calculate an organism's E. The crazy part is this calculated E matches up incredibly well with, like, the actual lifespans of different species.
So it's not just some theory. They have actual data. Pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But what about applications? Could we use this to, like, actually make people live longer?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The E document, it points to a few areas that look promising. They found that stuff like your metabolic rate, even things in your environment, can change your E, which then impacts how long your telomeres are.
Are you saying changing your lifestyle could slow down aging? That's pretty powerful stuff.
It's worth exploring for sure. The document also gets into research on telomerase, this enzyme that naturally helps maintain telomere length. And they found that messing with E can actually increase telomerase activity, which means slowing down how fast telomeres shorten.
So we could, like, nudge our bodies to age slower. That's wild. I imagine there are some ethical issues with all this, though.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The E document, it does acknowledge the ethical implications of messing with lifespan. They really stress how important it is to do responsible research in this area.
Makes sense. This is groundbreaking stuff. Definitely need to be careful. But the E document doesn't just talk about lifespan, right? Didn't you say something about cryogenics earlier? That sounds like straight up science fiction.
Cryogenics, the whole freezing people thing, it's definitely a fascinating field. And the E document, it proposes that E might be the key to making it really work. The biggest problem with cryogenics is preventing damage to cells and tissues when you freeze and then thaw them.
I can imagine that being a slight issue. So how does E help?
They propose something pretty radical, carefully controlling and moving E around so we can preserve stuff at those super low temperatures without causing damage.
So instead of just freezing things, we'd be, like, managing their E to protect them from the cold. That's pretty clever.
Yeah, it opens up some crazy possibilities. Imagine preserving organs for transplants with no risk of damage. Or even, like you said earlier, using cryogenics for space travel.
Yeah.
Putting astronauts in suspended animation until they reach their destination.
Now that's science fiction. The possibilities with E and cryogenics are, like, mind-boggling. There's got to be a limit to what we can do with this concept, right?
Well, the E document doesn't stop there. It goes on to explore the potential of E in a field that's changing everything, quantum computing.
Quantum computing. I know it's a big deal, but I'm not exactly sure how it all works. How does E fit into that?
Okay, so quantum computing, it uses the crazy rules of quantum mechanics to do calculations that regular computers just can't handle. It's going to revolutionize everything. But
Yeah.
here's the problem. Quantum bits, or qubits, the things quantum computers use, they're super fragile, really sensitive to any kind of noise, which messes up calculations.
So it's like trying to build a supercomputer out of soap bubbles. Super powerful, but super delicate.
That's a perfect analogy. And that's where E comes in. The E document says that if we carefully move energy around within the quantum computing system, we can make those qubits more stable, less likely to have errors.
So instead of trying to get rid of all the noise, we use E to make the qubits tougher.
Exactly. They've even come up with equations to model all this, taking into account things like noise levels and how stable different types of qubits are.
Okay, give me a second to process all that. So basically, E could help make quantum computers actually work in the real world, which opens up all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah. We could see breakthroughs in everything, personalized medicine, even creating new materials with crazy properties.
The possibilities are endless. But with all this powerful tech, there's got to be some ethical concerns, right?
Does the E document talk about that?
It does. They emphasize how important it is to have open discussions and collaboration between scientists, ethicists, and policymakers. Making sure we develop and use this technology responsibly.
That's good to hear. It's obvious that this E concept could change the world in some huge ways, both good and bad. But let's switch gears for a second. We've talked about E in these really advanced fields, but I'm curious about how it applies to something more everyday, like artificial intelligence. AI, that's another area where E could have a big impact. Remember how we talked about energy efficiency being a core part of E? Well, as AI gets more and more complex, it needs more and more power, and that's a big concern.
So E could help make AI more sustainable. That would be huge, considering how much energy those giant data centers use.
Exactly. The E document, it suggests that using E principles in AI algorithms could actually optimize their energy usage, making them less power hungry, which means reducing their impact on the environment.
That's a win-win. But can E do more for AI than just save energy?
The document also proposes that E can actually make AI learn faster and more accurately. Remember how E is all about the rate of change or expansion in a system? Well, for AI, that means how quickly an algorithm can process information and adapt to new data.
So an AI with higher E would basically be a faster learner, able to connect the dots and figure things out quicker.
Pretty much. Their research shows that by optimizing the flow of energy within AI systems, we could create more sophisticated AI, capable of doing things like understanding language, recognizing images, even making complex decisions, and all while using less energy.
Sounds like E is the missing piece to making AI truly powerful. But let's not forget about that other practical application we talked about, the one that might hit a little closer to home for some of our listeners: finance.
You mean the Forex trading model? It's a perfect example of how E can be applied to something as seemingly unpredictable as the financial market. They found that analyzing the E of different currencies and market indicators can actually help predict, how prices move with surprising accuracy.
Right, you mentioned the burst pattern and how the E-based model is really good at predicting those short-term price swings. But can E also help us manage risk in such a crazy market?
Managing risk is super important for any trader, and the E document actually addresses that directly. They talk about this thing called the inverse E factor, using it to manage risk by strategically setting stop-loss orders based on E calculations.
So instead of just randomly picking stop-loss levels, we could use E to make smarter decisions about when to get out of a trade.
Exactly. It's about aligning your risk management with how the market's energy is actually moving.
So E could not only help us find good trades, but also help us protect our investments. That's a pretty powerful combo.
Yeah.
But what about the bottom line? Are these E-based Forex trading models actually profitable in the real world?
They have tons of backtesting data in the E document, and the results are pretty amazing. E-based Forex trading models consistently do better than traditional trading strategies, especially when the market is really volatile. They've even shown a 10% increase in profits by using E in their algorithms.
10%. That's huge. It seems like this E concept could totally revolutionize how we understand, well, not just the universe, but also how we approach some of the biggest challenges we face in science, tech, even finance. But before we get too carried away, let's just recap what we've learned so far from the E document.
Yeah, a recap is good. We started by looking at how E works with biology, lifespan and aging. Then we went into cryogenics, quantum computing, AI, even finance. It's crazy how this one concept ties together so many different things.
It's mind-blowing, for sure. To be honest, it's a lot to process. This E concept is amazing, but it's completely changing how I think about the world.
I get it. It's a total paradigm shift. But we haven't even gotten to the most fascinating part yet.
There's more. My brain is already fried.
There's this one last piece of the E document we need to talk about: the ripple effect.
The ripple effect. Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more.
Imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. It creates those ripples that spread out, right? It's a chain reaction that goes way beyond where the pebble landed. That's the ripple effect, but applied to E.
So you're saying that changes in E, no matter how big or small, can trigger all these effects that ripple through different systems and maybe even affect things in ways we don't expect.
Exactly. And the E document, it suggests that understanding and predicting these ripple effects could be super important for making good decisions in everything from finance and policy to even global issues like climate change.
This is like a whole new way of looking at cause and effect, isn't it? It's not just about what happens right away, but understanding this complex web of E ripples that might be secretly influencing things.
That's the idea. The E document challenges us to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, to consider the long-term consequences of our actions, because even small things can create powerful ripples that change the world around us.
Wow, this is a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It really makes you think. I'm definitely ready to dive deeper into this ripple effect and see how it plays out in different situations.
Sounds good. When we come back, we'll get into how this idea of ripple effects works in specific scenarios, from historical events to, even personal decisions. Get ready to have your mind blown again.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this whole ripple effect thing from the E document. We talked about how, changes in E, big or small, can set off these chain reactions that go way beyond the initial event.
Yeah, and we touched on a few examples in biology and social systems, but let's get into some specific situations where this ripple effect could be, analyzed and maybe even predicted.
Okay, I'm ready for some examples. Where do we start?
Well, how about history? The E-document suggests using historical data to track how big events, wars, revolutions, even new technologies, how those might have created E-ripples that influenced later events.
So, like, could the invention of the printing press have caused an e-ripple that led to the Renaissance?
Hmm.
Or, I don't know, could the American Revolution have triggered a ripple that influenced the French Revolution?
Exactly. Those are great examples of how we could look at history through this lens of E-ripples. The document even suggests a way to measure these ripples, using data on stuff like population growth, economic indicators, even cultural shifts.
So we could actually see how E fluctuated over time, in response to specific events, and use that to figure out how those events shaped history, like a whole new way of looking at the past.
Exactly. It's like having a new tool to understand how everything in history is connected, finding hidden patterns and links that we might have missed before.
That's pretty cool. But what about something a bit more personal? Can E help us understand how our own choices create these ripple effects that impact our lives and the people around us?
Definitely. The document introduces this idea of an e-bubble, which is basically the unique e-field that surrounds each person.
So like our own personal energy signature, that interacts with the E of everything and everyone around us.
Exactly. And this e-bubble, it's always changing, influenced by, our thoughts, our emotions, the things we do, even the places we spend time in.
Okay, so every decision we make, every conversation we have, it's making a ripple in our e-bubble, which then bumps into other people's e-bubbles, creating this whole web of interconnected energy. Kind of a mind-blowing idea.
It is. The document suggests that if we can understand how our e-bubbles interact, it can help us make better choices, choices that line up with our goals and create, positive ripples in our own lives and the lives of the people around us.
It's like we have this invisible energy field that's always shaping our reality, and everyone else's too. And if we understand how it works, we can, I don't know, become more conscious creators of our own lives.
It's a pretty empowering concept for sure, but it also comes with responsibility, right? We need to be aware of the ripple effects we're creating, recognizing that even the smallest choices can have big consequences down the line.
That's a powerful message. This whole E thing is not just about understanding the universe, it's about understanding ourselves and how we fit into this web of energy. We're all connected, and what we do matters.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. The E-document, it really emphasizes that we're not just isolated individuals. We're all part of this dynamic, interconnected system. Our actions, our thoughts, our emotions, they all create ripples that go way beyond what we can see. They influence how energy flows and shape the reality we all experience together.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like we've only just begun to explore this whole E concept. It's profound. It's definitely changed how I think about things. I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Me too. The E-document, it's a call to action. It's asking us to rethink everything we thought we knew about time, energy, how we're all connected. It's inviting us to explore the possibilities that come with this new way of seeing reality.
Well, thank you for taking me on this journey. It's been truly mind-expanding. And to everyone listening out there, I definitely recommend checking out the E-document for yourself. It might just change how you see the world.
Yeah, and remember, this is just the beginning. The E-document, it's a living thing. It's always evolving as we make new discoveries and find new ways to use this concept. We invite you to join us on this journey of exploration as we keep uncovering the secrets of E and unlock its potential to make things better for everyone.
I'm excited to see what the future holds for all this. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
And never forget, everything is connected. The ripples you create today, they can shape the world of tomorrow.